There are landscapes that don't appear on postcards, yet feel as if they've been waiting for you long before you ever knew their names. There are mountains that rise like forgotten kingdoms above the clouds, deserts where silence stretches beyond the horizon, and valleys so remote they seem untouched by time itself. Places where nature doesn't just surround you, it overwhelms you, humbles you, rewrites you. I began this journey searching for something I couldn't quite define, perhaps a glimpse of a world that still exists beyond the reach of crowds and camera flashes. What I found was something far deeper than I expected. In the hidden ranges of western China, I stood before peaks that pierced through oceans of mist like stone giants. In vast deserts, I watched dunes roll endlessly beneath a sky so clear it felt infinite. And in remote highlands, I discovered lakes that mirrored the heavens so perfectly it was hard to tell where earth ended and sky began. These aren't the places you see in travel brochures. They're the ones whispered about past between those who've gone looking for something more. This isn't the journey you plan. It's the one that finds you. Where every step pulls you further away from the familiar and closer to something raw, ancient, and unforgettable. Come with me beyond the edges of the map, because the most extraordinary places are the ones still hidden from the world. Sanqing Shan. There are mountains that rise, and then there are mountains that seem to hover. Sanqing Shan belongs to the latter, an otherworldly landscape where jagged granite spires erupt from a rolling ocean of clouds, as if the earth itself is trying to pierce the heavens. At first light, the entire range transforms into something almost unreal. Waves of mist drift slowly through the valleys, wrapping around the towering rock pillars like silk. Peaks appear and disappear in silence, revealed only for a moment before being swallowed again by the shifting clouds. It feels less like a mountain range and more like a living, breathing entity, constantly moving, constantly changing. The formations here are bizarre, almost sculptural. Some resemble ancient monks frozen in meditation, others like beasts watching over the land. For centuries, Taoist monks believed this was sacred ground, a place where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grows thin. And standing here, it's not hard to understand why. There's a stillness that settles into your bones. No city noise, no distant hum of civilization, just wind, cloud, and stone. Even time seems to hesitate. Sanqing Shan doesn't overwhelm you with scale alone. It disorients you, gently pulling you into a space where reality feels slightly altered. You're not just looking at a landscape, you're witnessing something that feels ancient, intentional, almost conscious. And as the clouds continue their slow, hypnotic dance, one thought quietly emerges. Some places aren't meant to be understood, only experienced. Mount Siguniang. Far from the crowded skylines and neon glow, there exists a place where the air thins, the world quiets, and the land stretches wide and untouched. Mount Siguniang, often called the Four Sisters Mountain, rises like a frozen symphony of snow and stone in western China. Its peaks are sharp, elegant, and intimidating, each one towering higher than the last, draped in permanent snow that glows softly beneath the sun. But what makes this place truly unforgettable isn't just the mountains, it's the contrast. Below those icy summits lie vast alpine meadows, impossibly green and dotted with wildflowers that sway gently in the wind. Yaks wander slowly across the landscape, their silhouettes adding a sense of timelessness, as if this scene has remained unchanged for centuries. The deeper you venture into the valleys, the more surreal it becomes. Crystal-clear rivers carve their way through the land, reflecting the towering peaks above like fractured mirrors. Every turn reveals a new composition, snowgrass sky layered with perfect balance. There's a quiet power here. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but steady grounded and deeply humbling. Local Tibetan communities have long considered these mountains sacred, believing them to be the embodiment of four divine sisters. And as clouds gather around the peaks, wrapping them in soft veils, it feels as though those stories might not be myths at all, but memories. Mount Siguniang doesn't demand your attention. It earns it slowly, subtly, until you realize you've stopped thinking altogether and simply started feeling. Tagong Grassland. There is a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full. Tagong Grassland is filled with that silence. Stretching endlessly beneath an open sky, this high-altitude plateau feels like the edge of the world. The horizon seems impossibly distant, as if the land has decided to keep unfolding forever. Wind moves freely here unhindered, carrying with it the faint sounds of prayer flags fluttering in the distance. At the heart of this vast openness stands a golden monastery, radiant, solitary, almost surreal. Against the muted tones of the grassland and the deep blue sky, it gleams like something sacred dropped gently onto the earth. Yaks graze lazily across the fields, their slow, deliberate movements mirroring the rhythm of life here. Nothing rushes, nothing competes. Everything simply exists. But what makes Tagong unforgettable isn't just its beauty, it's its presence. There's a spiritual weight in the air, subtle but undeniable. The kind that makes you lower your voice without realizing it. The kind that makes you pause, not out of necessity, but out of instinct. As the sun begins to set, the entire grassland shifts in color, gold bleeding into amber shadows, stretching long across the land. The monastery glows even brighter now, almost otherworldly, as if lit from within. And in that moment, standing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but sky and earth, you begin to understand. Some places don't just exist on the map, they exist somewhere deeper. Laojun Mountain. High above the world below, where clouds gather like drifting oceans, there is a place that feels almost too perfect to be real. Laojun Mountain rises steep and dramatic, its rugged slopes leading to something unexpected, an intricate complex of golden temples perched at the very top, shimmering against the sky like a vision pulled from mythology. Reaching the summit feels less like a hike and more like an ascent into another realm. As you climb higher, the air grows thinner, the noise fades, and the landscape begins to dissolve into mist. Then suddenly, through the clouds, the temples emerge. They don't just sit on the mountain, they command it. Golden rooftops catch the sunlight and reflect it in every direction, creating a glow that feels almost divine. In winter, when snow blankets the peaks, the contrast becomes even more surreal. White silence below, radiant gold above. This mountain is deeply tied to Taoist philosophy, believed to be a place where heaven and earth meet. And standing here, surrounded by endless sky, it's easy to feel that connection. There's something profoundly cinematic about Laojun Mountain, not just visually, but emotionally. It feels staged intentional, as if every element stone cloud light has been placed with purpose. And yet nothing here is artificial. As the clouds roll in and out, revealing and concealing the temples in slow motion, one realization settles in. You're not just witnessing a view, you're stepping into a myth that never stopped existing. Badain Jaran Desert. At first glance, it looks like any other desert, endless sand, relentless sun, a landscape defined by absence. But the deeper you go into the Badain Jaran Desert, the more that illusion begins to break. Because this is not an empty place. Towering dunes rise abruptly from the earth, some of the tallest on the planet, their slopes so steep they seem almost impossible. Wind carves them into sharp, elegant ridges that shift and reshape with time, creating patterns that feel both chaotic and precise. But then, unexpectedly, there is water. Hidden between these massive dunes are dozens of pristine lakes, their surfaces still and glass-like, reflecting the sky with startling clarity. Some shimmer in deep blue, others glow with a greenish hue, as if holding secrets beneath their surface. The contrast is almost surreal. Fire and water, heat and stillness, motion and silence. And then there's the sound. On certain dunes, when the wind moves just right, the sand begins to hum a low resonant vibration often called the singing dunes. It's a sound that doesn't feel natural, almost mechanical, like the desert itself is trying to communicate. There are no crowds here. No easy roads. Just distance isolation and a strange quiet intensity. As the sun sets, shadows stretch across the dunes and the temperature drops rapidly. The sky darkens into a deep, endless black, revealing a field of stars so dense it feels overwhelming. In that moment, surrounded by sand, silence, and sky, one thought becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't just a desert. It's a world of contradictions, beautiful, hostile, and utterly unforgettable. Zhangye Danxia Landform. At first, it doesn't look real. The hills of Zhangye Danxia unfold like a painting, layers of crimson, gold, ochre, and burnt orange spilling across the landscape in fluid, almost deliberate strokes. It feels less like geology and more like artistry, as if the earth itself decided to experiment with color. But this isn't paint. It's time. Over millions of years, layers of mineral-rich sandstone were compressed, tilted, and carved by wind and water into these surreal formations. What remains is a terrain that defies expectation, soft curves and sharp ridges, each band of color telling a different chapter of the planet's past. What makes Zhangye Danxia truly mesmerizing is how alive it feels. The colors shift constantly depending on the light. At sunrise, the hills glow with a gentle warmth, their tones soft and almost pastel. By midday, they sharpen bold, vibrant, unapologetic. And at sunset, everything deepens into rich, fiery hues, as if the land itself is burning from within. There are no towering peaks here, no dramatic cliffs, just rolling waves of color that stretch endlessly into the distance. And somehow that subtlety makes it even more hypnotic. Standing above it all, looking out across this layered world, you begin to lose your sense of scale. The land becomes abstract. Familiar shapes dissolve into patterns, textures, colors. It's not just something you see, it's something you try to understand and quietly realize you can't. Flaming mountains. There's a place where the heat doesn't just surround you, it defines everything. The flaming mountains stretch across the Xinjiang desert like a series of smoldering waves, their deep red surfaces cracked and scorched by relentless sun. From a distance, they seem to glow. Up close, they radiate. This is one of the hottest regions in China. In summer, temperatures climb to extremes that feel almost unreal. The air shimmers constantly, bending light, distorting the horizon, making the entire landscape feel unstable, like a mirage that might vanish at any moment. And yet it's not empty. These mountains carry stories, ancient mythical ones. They're famously tied to the classic novel Journey to the West, where the Monkey King battled flames that could not be extinguished. Standing here, feeling the heat rise from the ground beneath your feet, that legend suddenly feels less like fiction. The terrain itself is stark and unforgiving. No greenery, no softness, just ridges of red rock carved into sharp rhythmic patterns. Every curve, every shadow feels exaggerated under the harsh sunlight. Tengger Desert. The Tengger Desert doesn't reveal itself all at once. By day, it appears vast but simple, rolling dunes, pale gold under an open sky. The wind moves quietly across the surface, tracing delicate lines that vanish as quickly as they form. It feels still almost suspended. But everything changes when the sun disappears. As darkness settles in the desert, transforms into something entirely different. The sky, once empty and bright, becomes impossibly dense, filled with stars so sharp and numerous they feel within reach. The Milky Way stretches overhead in a luminous arc, uninterrupted, unpolluted, overwhelming. There are no city lights here, no distant glow, just darkness and the sky. And in that darkness, the desert becomes more alive than ever. The temperature drops quickly, the air turning crisp, almost biting. Sounds carry farther footsteps in sand wind, brushing against the dunes, the faint shifting of grains under their own weight. Every sensation feels amplified. Camping here isn't just about the landscape, it's about perspective. The sheer scale of the sky forces you to confront something rare, how small you are and how vast everything else is. Time behaves differently in Tengger. Without distractions, without noise, minutes stretch into something longer. You begin to notice things you normally wouldn't: the movement of stars, the subtle change in wind, the rhythm of your own breath. And somewhere between sunset and sunrise, the desert stops feeling empty. It starts to feel infinite. Kanas Lake. Kanas Lake feels like a place built on uncertainty. Its waters shift in color depending on the season, the weather, even the time of day. Sometimes a deep emerald, other times a pale, almost milky turquoise. No single description ever seems to capture it fully. Surrounded by dense forests and distant snow-capped peaks, the lake sits quietly within a landscape that feels almost untouched. In autumn, the trees ignite in shades of gold and amber, their reflections trembling across the surface. In the early morning, mist hovers just above the water, drifting, slowly obscuring and revealing in equal measure. But what gives Kanas its unique atmosphere isn't just its beauty, it's the stories. For decades, there have been whispers of something beneath the surface. Local legends speak of a mysterious creature inhabiting the depths occasionally glimpsed in the rippling wake of the water. There's no proof, no certainty, only accounts passed down and quietly believed. Whether real or imagined, the effect is the same. You find yourself watching the lake differently. Not just admiring it, but studying it. Waiting, wondering. Every ripple becomes meaningful. Every shadow a possibility. And yet, despite the mystery, there's a calmness here that feels grounding. The lake doesn't feel threatening. It feels ancient, patient, holding on to secrets. It has no intention of revealing. Kanas doesn't ask to be explained. It simply invites you to look a little closer and question what you think you see. Chaka Salt Lake. Chaka Salt Lake is often described as a mirror of the sky, but the phrase only begins to capture what happens here. Under the right conditions, the surface becomes so reflective that depth disappears entirely. The boundary between sky and ground dissolves, creating a seamless visual plane where clouds light and human figures appear suspended in midair. Walking across it feels disorienting, like stepping into a reflection rather than onto solid ground. The lake itself is shallow, covered in a thin layer of salt that crystallizes into geometric patterns. In some areas, narrow tracks cut across the surface, including a small railway once used for salt transport. Today, it extends into the distance like a line drawn through infinity. Light plays a critical role here. At midday, reflections are sharp and precise, almost photographic. But during sunrise and sunset, the scene softens. Colors bleed into one another, pinks, blues, golds, blurring edges and creating a dreamlike atmosphere. There is very little sound. Footsteps are muted, absorbed by the thin layer of water. Even voices seem to carry differently, quieter, as if the space itself resists disturbance. Chaka is not a place of movement or action. It is a place of perception. Visitors often slow down instinctively, adjusting their pace to match the stillness around them. Photography becomes secondary to experience as the environment subtly shifts from visual spectacle to something more immersive. In Chaka, reality feels less defined, not because it disappears, but because it reflects itself so perfectly that you begin to question where it truly begins. Furong Town. Furong Town doesn't ease you into its presence. It reveals itself all at once. Perched dramatically along a cliffside, the entire town seems to hover above a roaring waterfall that cuts straight through its center. Water crashes down into the gorge below, constant and unrelenting, while above it life unfolds in narrow alleyways and wooden balconies. It's an unlikely combination, fragile architecture and raw force coexisting in perfect balance. During the day, the town feels grounded. Stone steps, red lanterns, small shops tucked into ancient walls, it carries the texture of history worn but alive. But it's at night that Furong transforms. Lights flicker on one by one. Warm glows spill from windows and reflect off wet stone. The waterfall, once bright and visible, becomes a dark, moving silhouette behind the town. Mist rises, catching the light, softening everything into something almost dreamlike. You can walk behind the waterfall itself through a narrow path carved into the rock. From there, the view shifts completely. The town becomes a glowing backdrop framed by cascading water in the foreground. Sound surrounds you. Vision blurs. It's immersive, almost overwhelming. And yet above all that movement, the town remains steady. Furong isn't just built near nature, it's built into it. Phoenix Ancient Town. Fenghuang Ancient Town rests along the Tuojiang River in western Hunan, where time seems to move with a quieter, older rhythm. Unlike vast landscapes that stretch endlessly outward, this place draws you inward. Narrow stone streets wind between wooden stilt houses that lean gently over the water, their reflections trembling in the slow current below. At first glance, the town feels almost untouched, as if it has remained suspended between past and present. The river defines everything here. During the day, its surface carries a muted green tone, soft and reflective, mirroring rooftops and hanging balconies. Wooden boats drift slowly across, guided by long poles, leaving behind gentle ripples that distort the symmetry of the town. When evening arrives, the entire scene transforms. Lanterns glow to life, casting warm orange light onto the water, and the reflections stretch into long, shimmering lines. The contrast between darkness and light feels intimate rather than dramatic. But Fenghuang is not only about architecture or scenery. It is shaped by the presence of the Miao and Tujia communities whose traditions still linger in daily life. You can sense it in the patterns of clothing, in the quiet rhythm of local markets, and in the way the town carries its history without urgency. Nothing feels rushed here. Despite its popularity, there is still a layer of stillness beneath the surface. Early in the morning, before the crowds arrive, mist often hangs low over the river, softening edges and muting sound. In those moments, Fenghuang feels less like a destination and more like a memory, something half real, half imagined. It does not overwhelm you with scale. Instead, it holds your attention in small details, in reflections, in silence. Yamdrok Lake. From above, Yamdrok Lake looks almost unreal, its shape irregular, its color impossibly vivid. A striking turquoise that cuts through the muted tones of the Tibetan plateau like a fragment of sky that somehow fell to earth. But Yamdrok is more than a landscape. It's a presence. For centuries, it has been considered one of Tibet's most sacred lakes, believed to hold spiritual significance that extends far beyond its physical form. Locals don't just visit this place, they revere it. To them, the lake is alive. As you approach its shores, the scale becomes more apparent. The water stretches endlessly, bordered by rolling hills and distant snow-covered mountains. The air is thin, crisp, carrying a stillness that feels deliberate. There's very little movement here. No waves crashing, no loud winds, just a quiet, steady calm. And then there's the color. It doesn't stay constant. Under shifting light, the turquoise deepens, softens, brightens, never static, always evolving. It draws your attention effortlessly, holding it in a way that feels almost meditative. Standing beside Yamdrok, conversation feels unnecessary. Even thought begins to slow. You don't analyze the view. You absorb it. Prayer flags flutter in the distance, their colors faded but persistent, carrying silent messages across the plateau. Yaks graze slowly along the shoreline, their presence grounding the scene in something real. And yet, there's always that lingering feeling that this place exists on a different level entirely. Not just seen, but felt. Yubeng Village. Reaching Yubeng Village is not straightforward. There are no highways leading in no direct routes. The journey requires time, often a full day of trekking through mountain paths, forests, and steep ascents. And that isolation defines everything about the place. Hidden deep within the Meili Snow Mountain Range, Yubeng feels removed from the pace of the outside world. The village is small, quiet, and surrounded entirely by towering peaks that seem to enclose it like natural walls. Life here moves with the terrain. Wooden houses are scattered across the valley, smoke rising gently from chimneys in the early morning. Narrow paths connect homes, fields, and small gathering spaces. There is no rush, no visible urgency, just a steady rhythm shaped by weathered daylight and tradition. The landscape beyond the village is equally striking. Trails lead to glacial lakes, waterfalls, and viewpoints where the mountains reveal themselves in full scale. One of the most well-known routes ends at a waterfall cascading down from high above its source, hidden within the snowfields. What distinguishes Yubeng is not just its remoteness, but its continuity. Modern development has reached many parts of the region, yet here change feels minimal. Practices, architecture, and daily routines remain closely tied to the past. Visitors don't just arrive, they transition. The effort required to reach Yubeng creates a natural separation, a shift in mindset. By the time you enter the valley, the noise of the outside world has already faded. And in its place, something quieter emerges, something slower, more grounded and deeply connected to the land. Tengger Leaping Gorge. Tengger Leaping Gorge cuts sharply through the landscape of Yunnan, forming one of the deepest river canyons in the world. Here, the Jinsha River forces its way between two massive mountain ranges, creating a corridor of steep cliffs and constant motion. The scale is immediate. On either side, rock walls rise almost vertically, climbing thousands of meters into the sky. The river below moves fast, loud, forceful, and unrelenting, its surface broken by waves and currents that reflect the intensity of the terrain. Unlike many scenic locations, Tengger Leaping Gorge is experienced through movement. A network of hiking trails runs along the cliffs, offering shifting perspectives of the canyon. At certain points, the path narrows, hugging the mountainside with little separation between you and the drop below. The exposure adds a physical dimension to the experience, one that heightens awareness with every step. The name of the gorge comes from a local legend. A tiger once leapt across the narrowest section of the river to escape a hunter. Whether true or not, the story reflects the scale of the place where distances feel both immense and, in rare moments, surprisingly close. Conditions change quickly here. Light moves across the canyon walls, altering textures and shadows throughout the day. Weather can shift just as rapidly, bringing clouds that descend into the gorge and partially obscure the view. Tengger Leaping Gorge is not static. It is defined by movement of water, of air, of those who pass through it. And in that movement, it reveals its full character, powerful, unpredictable, and deeply immersive. Nalati Grassland. Nalati Grassland stretches across the Ili River Valley in Xinjiang, forming one of the most expansive alpine meadows in the region. Unlike the stark deserts often associated with this part of China, Nalati presents a different landscape, one defined by softness, openness, and seasonal change. The terrain rolls gently covered in dense grass that shifts color throughout the year. In spring and summer, wildflowers appear in scattered clusters, adding subtle variation to the green expanse. In autumn, the tones deepen, becoming warmer, more muted. Mountains frame the grassland in the distance, their presence constant but not overwhelming. Snow remains visible on higher elevations, even as the valley below stays temperate. Human activity here follows a nomadic tradition. Yurts' portable circular dwellings are set up across the grassland, often accompanied by grazing livestock. Horses move freely, and herders travel with them, maintaining patterns of movement that have existed for generations. There is a functional simplicity to life in Nalati. Resources are used directly, routines are shaped by natural cycles, and the environment dictates both pace and direction. For visitors, the experience is not defined by landmarks, but by continuity. There is no single focal point, no central attraction. Instead, the landscape unfolds, gradually revealing variations in light texture and scale over time. Movement is slow, whether on foot, horseback, or vehicle. The openness encourages it. Nalati does not impose itself. It extends outward, offering space rather than spectacle. And within that space, a different kind of experience emerges, one that is less about observation and more about presence. Hemu Village. Hemu doesn't feel discovered. It feels remembered. Tucked deep within the far reaches of Xinjiang, this small wooden village looks like it slipped out of a forgotten storybook and simply stayed hidden long enough to remain untouched. Log houses sit quietly beneath towering birch forests, their roofs dusted with snow in winter or surrounded by gold in autumn. Either way, it never quite feels real. Morning is when Hemu reveals itself. Before the sun fully rises, a soft blue light settles over the valley. Thin streams of smoke begin to rise from chimneys, drifting slowly into the cold air, blurring the outlines of the village. It's quiet, almost unnaturally so. No engines, no crowds. Just the faint creak of wood, distant footsteps, and the occasional bark echoing through the trees. Then the sunlight arrives. It spills gently across the rooftops, catching on frost, illuminating the smoke, turning the entire village into something cinematic, almost staged, but unmistakably real. What makes Hemu so captivating isn't just its beauty, It's the feeling that nothing here is trying to impress you. Life continues as it always has, simple, grounded, unbothered by the outside world. People move slowly. Time stretches. Moments linger longer than they should. And as you walk through the narrow paths between wooden homes, you start to realize this isn't a place you visit for excitement. It's a place you arrive at when you're ready to slow down enough to notice everything you've been missing. Danba Villages. Danba doesn't reveal its secrets all at once. From a distance, it looks peaceful. Clusters of white houses scattered across a green valley framed by mountains that rise gently rather than dramatically. But then you notice them, the towers. Tall, narrow, and made of stone, they rise unexpectedly between homes and hillsides, some standing over 1,000 years old. No one fully agrees on why they were built. Defense, communication, status. The answers remain unclear, and that uncertainty lingers in the air. They don't dominate the landscape. They punctuate it. As you move deeper into the valley, the towers appear and disappear, sometimes hidden behind trees, sometimes standing alone against the sky. They feel deliberate but also mysterious, like markers from a story that was never fully told. Daily life continues around them. Children run along narrow paths. Smoke curls upward from kitchens. Fields are tended with quiet focus. The past and present coexist here not in contrast, but in quiet alignment. There's something subtly unsettling about Danba, not in a negative way, but in the sense that you're aware of something just beyond understanding. The towers don't explain themselves. They simply exist. And maybe that's what makes them so compelling. Because in a world where everything is labeled, mapped, and defined, Danba still holds on to a question. Weizhou Island. Weizhou Island feels like it belongs somewhere else entirely. Off the southern coast of China, this volcanic island carries a rhythm that contrasts sharply with the mainland. The air is heavier, warmer. The pace is slower. And the landscape, defined by black volcanic rock, clear water, and open sky, leans closer to something tropical. But beneath that calm surface, there's a different story. This island was shaped by fire. Ancient eruptions left behind jagged coastlines and layered rock formations that now meet the sea in sharp, uneven edges. Waves crash against them endlessly, carving, smoothing, reshaping an ongoing conversation between land and water. Inland things soften. Palm trees sway gently. Small villages spread out casually without urgency. A quiet church stands unexpectedly near the shore, its European design contrasting with the surrounding environment, a reminder of the island's layered history. Sunsets here are slow and expansive. The sky stretches wide, shifting through gradients of orange-pink and deepening blue. The ocean reflects it all, turning the entire horizon into a moving canvas. Weizhou doesn't overwhelm you. It disarms you. It's the kind of place where time loosens its grip, where plans become optional, and where the line between exploration and simply existing begins to blur. Stone forest. At first glance, it looks impossible. The stone forest rises from the earth in sharp vertical formations, thousands of limestone pillars packed tightly together, creating a landscape that feels more architectural than natural. Like a city, but abandoned before it was ever finished. Walking into it changes everything. Paths wind through narrow corridors of stone, where towering formations block out the sky and twist your sense of direction. Some sections feel open, almost expansive. Others close in, tightly forcing you to navigate through tight passages where the world narrows to rock on either side. There's no single way through, and that's part of the experience. The formations themselves are jagged, irregular, and unpredictable. Some lean at impossible angles. Others stand rigid and tall like frozen figures. Over time, wind and water have carved them into shapes that feel almost intentional. Faces, blades, silhouettes. It's easy to get disoriented here. Not just physically, but mentally. The repetition of stone, the shifting light, the maze-like structure. It pulls you out of your usual sense of space and replaces it with something unfamiliar. And yet there's a strange calm within it. Because once you stop trying to understand the layout, you start to move with it. The stone forest doesn't guide you. It lets you get lost.
What the dog doing?
Some journeys change the way you see the world. Others change the way you feel within it. Across these hidden corners of China, from silent deserts to cloud-wrapped peaks, from forgotten villages to landscapes that defy logic, one thing becomes clear. There is still so much of this world left untouched, unseen, and quietly waiting. Not for crowds, not for attention, but for those willing to go further. Because beyond the maps, beyond the familiar, there are places that don't just exist. They stay with you.